AMD quietly removed a security feature from consumer CPUs. Users noticed, got loud about it, and AMD put it back. That whole cycle happened. And it's worth understanding what was actually removed, why AMD did it, and what it tells us about how chip companies decide who gets what. So let's start with the feature itself. It's called memory encryption. Specifically, AMD has had something called secure memory encryption, or SME, built into its processors for years. What it does is pretty straightforward. It encrypts the data sitting in your RAM in real time, using a key that lives inside the processor itself. The idea is that even if someone physically pulls your RAM stick and reads it directly, or if a piece of malware tries to dump the contents of memory, all they get is scrambled garbage. That matters more than it sounds. A lot of sensitive data passes through RAM. Encryption keys, passwords, session tokens, chunks of files you're working on. Without memory encryption, that data just sits there in plain text while your machine is running. With it, there's a layer of protection that most people never think about, but security-conscious users absolutely rely on. Now here's where AMD's decision comes in. At some point, AMD started shipping consumer chips without this feature enabled or available. Not enterprise chips, not server chips, just the consumer-facing stuff, your Ryzen desktop and laptop processors. And when people figured that out, they were not happy. The criticism wasn't just about losing a feature. It was about the reason people suspected was behind it. AMD's enterprise chips, the EPYC server processors, have robust memory encryption support. That's actually a selling point for data centers and cloud providers. So when AMD stripped it from the consumer side, a lot of users read that as a deliberate move to push anyone who cares about security toward the pricier enterprise hardware. You want the full security stack, pay up. AMD didn't exactly come out and say that's what they were doing, but the optics were bad. And in tech, optics matter, especially when your community is full of people who know exactly what was removed and why it might have been removed. This kind of tiering isn't new, by the way. Chip companies have been doing it for decades. Intel does it. AMD does it. The basic playbook is this. You design a chip with a full feature set, then you segment the market by enabling or disabling certain features depending on which product line it ends up in. Sometimes it's about yields and manufacturing. Sometimes it's genuine differentiation. And sometimes it's purely commercial, keeping lower-margin consumer products from cannibalizing higher-margin enterprise ones. Features that get gated this way include things like ECC memory support, which helps detect and correct RAM errors, certain virtualization capabilities, higher core counts, and yes, advanced security features like memory encryption. None of this is hidden exactly, but it's rarely announced loudly either. It tends to show up in spec sheets that most people never read. What made this AMD situation different is that the feature was already there. People had it, they built systems around it, they relied on it. Removing something after the fact hits differently than never offering it. That's not segmentation anymore. That feels like a downgrade. And to AMD's credit, they listened. After the community response, they reversed the decision. Memory encryption is going back into the consumer lineup. That's actually a better outcome than you'd expect from a lot of tech companies, which tend to hold the line on these decisions once they're made. But it leaves a bigger question sitting there. How much should security be a premium feature at all? Memory encryption isn't some exotic capability that costs enormous resources to implement. The underlying hardware is already there in these chips. Enabling it is largely a software and firmware decision. So when a company gates it behind enterprise pricing, they're not really selling you access to different hardware. They're selling you permission to use hardware you technically already paid for. That's the part that rubs people the wrong way. And honestly, it should. Security shouldn't be something you have to buy up to. The consequences of weak security aren't abstract. Ransomware hits consumers, not just enterprises. Physical theft happens to laptops, not just servers. The people who need memory encryption aren't only running data centers. Now, AMD reversing course here is genuinely good news. It sets a small but real precedent that user pressure on security decisions can work. That matters. It means paying attention to spec sheets and patch notes and changelog entries is worthwhile, because catching these things early and making noise about them actually changes outcomes sometimes. If you want to check whether your own system has memory encryption enabled, it's usually visible in the BIOS under Security or Memory settings, and sometimes surfaced through tools like AMD's own software or third-party system info apps. It won't be on by default on most consumer builds, even when it's available, so it's worth checking. The bottom line is this. AMD made a call that looked a lot like using security as a market segmentation tool. Users called it out clearly and specifically, and AMD walked it back. That's the system working, more or less. But it's a reminder that these decisions happen quietly, and they don't always get reversed unless someone's paying close attention.